Okay, so for this one, we've got the Athletics La Liga writer Dermot Corrigan and also our FC Barcelona correspondent Paul Ballus as well. Gents, I mean, look, I want to say I was surprised, but I feel like it's been rumbling for a little while now that Xavi might not be at Barcelona in the future. I mean, look where they are at this current moment in time at the Spanish Super Cup. Copa del Rey, 11 points behind Girona. I mean, the surprise package that is Girona. And then you look at the Champions League and you're asking, Napoli next? It's almost scripted that this season might be his last. But a lot of people are surprised by this news, Paul. Why?
Well, because I think that the timings are just are sort of shocking. I mean, you don't expect Xavi to come after like a big loss in a press conference where he's supposed like to deliver answers and to lift the spirits in a tough last period of the season and just say that he's going to resign and that he's not going to be the manager next season. That was a bit of a shock. But as you were saying, I mean, all the context around Barcelona was building up to sort of this moment. I think that Xavi, who had like a successful season last year, basically winning La Liga and the Spanish Super Cup, he hasn't been able to build up on this moment and to make the team progress on the pitch. He's also, of course, and as just we will cover later on, but he hasn't been packed or he has been navigating with a tough situation inside the club, which is also like a thing that to take into account when you speak about Barcelona. But yeah, at the end of the day, and what's most surprising as well about it is that Xavi was like overwhelmed by the pressure and just by the noise and by all the politics that Barcelona involve, and that's something that, in my opinion, has to push Barcelona to a sort of period of like self-reflection. Because if you want to imagine like a person who is prepared to deal with everything that Barcelona is, probably Xavi is the best man in the industry, just probably next to Pep Guardiola, because Xavi has spent half of his life linked on this club, first as a player, then as a manager, and even with all the background, he's been like not destroyed, but he's been like heavily impacted and affected both on a personal but also like on a family level by all the pressure of this entorno, this like atmosphere, everyone talking about Barcelona. And that's eventually what led Xavi to believe that, okay, that possibly the best thing for him and for the club was just to look for a fresh new start with another person. And yeah, let's see how it goes. Now I think that everyone expects that his decision takes a bit of pressure off him, but also like lift the spirits and just boost the players in their desire just to back the manager or to respond on the pitch. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, Dermot, I mean, he has explicitly spoken about the mental health toll this has taken on him. But I wonder, you've got a player who was so successful at the club, who knows the club so well. Surely he knew this is the kind of pressure that comes with being a Barcelona manager or a coach.
Yeah, I think you can know all about it, and you can see it even as being a senior member in the dressing room for so long. You can grow up around the club and see what it's done to other managers, including Pep Guardiola in the past, who left the club because he couldn't continue anymore 15 years ago. But until you're actually in the job, until you're doing it, dealing with it day to day with the stresses and the strains that are involved, then you can't know what it's like. And Xavi, it's taken huge strain on him. Like, it has been coming. Anybody who's been following Barca closely, listening to Xavi over the last months could see that there were big problems there, and the relationship with Laporta and with the new sporting director Deco wasn't as good as it could be. There have been a lot of changes at Barca, even since they won La Liga last season. That squad was put together. Xavi had the backing of Mateo Alemán was the sporting director. Jordi Cruyff was a really influential person, kind of between the boardroom and the dressing room. And Sergio Busquets was the club captain. He was the guy who, Xavi was the manager, but Busquets did a lot of the leadership on the pitch, was tactically, key to the team. Those three guys who were there supporting Xavi all left in the summer. New people came in. Xavi didn't feel that he had the support maybe that he needed, or that the team needed. New players were put on him that he deliberately said that he didn't want, like João Felix. And it is a pity, really, for those of us who, really enjoyed him. Not a Barca fan, but I really enjoyed watching Xavi play. Was really excited to see what he would do when he came back to the club. When they won La Liga last season, it wasn't really with the pure, Blaugrana style football that we kind of hoped, or that Xavi had talked about so much. They got the job done, but this season has been disastrous. Really, they've hammered by Real Madrid in the Super Copa final. knocked out at Athletic Bilbao in the Copa del Rey by Ernesto Valverde, a former Barcelona manager, somebody who managed Xavi himself when he was there. And Xavi just looked like he couldn't continue. As Paul says there, whether it's going to, just because Xavi says he's going to leave now at the end of the season, will he continue on till the end of the season? Will his decision to leave, take away some of those pressures that were there? Maybe it'll lift off his shoulders. Maybe he'll be able to handle things better. But, whether it'll lift the dressing room, improve the relationship with the boardroom, remains to be seen.
Paul, yesterday we were talking about Jurgen Klopp and how influential he's been at Liverpool, but also being able to bring his personnel in. So he's almost got his own little circle of trust, right? Whereas Xavi, from articles you've written and also Dermot, you get a sense that at times his authority was overruled. I imagine what kind of impact that has to the players there, because he's made a decision and then it's been overruled by the board. And then what kind of impact that has on him on a personal level? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he has been a man of the club, and he said that like multiple times that he's put the club ahead of himself. But I think that eventually that just became a problem because he had to defend not himself but his position as a manager. And gradually, as Dermot was pointing out here, he has been left alone inside the club. Dermot was saying the departures of Jordi Cruyff, who was really close to him, Matteo Alemany, who with the time become closer to him as well, and they both left. Deco was brought in, and Xavi's in public and in private, they are pointing out that the relationship with Deco is really good and that is everything fine, and he has been backing Laporta and all the board in all his words after announcing his resignation. But at the same time, if you analyze facts, in the signings from last summer, all the signings were quite far away from Xavi's criteria. As Dermot was saying as well, Sergio Busquets was, Xavi pointed out that Sergio Busquets' replacement had to be the priority signing this summer, and the best that Barcelona could do, or at least told Xavi that they could do, was Oriol Romeu, which
he's not been great, has he?
Yeah, he's not been great, and I don't want to blame him because poor guy, he has not gone through a good moment. When he plays football, you can see that he's not enjoying himself. And last season he was a really good performer in La Liga with Girona, so I think that he's a better player than the player that we are witnessing right now. But what I was mentioning, Xavi had requested the likes of Martin Zubimendi, of Joshua Kimmich, of Marcelo Brozovic, but Barcelona basically felt that they had no option to get those players, so they brought in Oriol Romeu, and instead they brought in players that were more I would say that they were recruited more by relationships with agents or the interest that the club had to bring the players in. In the case of Joao Felix, Joao Cancelo, I would say that is a player that Xavi wanted as well. But he ticked all the boxes because he's represented by George Mendes, who is really close to Laporte as well. So he ticked all the boxes in that regard. But then you have Vitor Roque as well, who is a 30 million signing that potentially with add-ons it can rise up to 61 million. And it's your biggest investment in a player, which is probably what Xavi didn't feel that was the most needed thing in the world. So yeah, if you analyze all the steps that Barcelona had been doing since they won La Liga last season, with all those departures that I was mentioning and the signings that they've done this season, it's been Xavi has lost a bit his place. And with what you were mentioning, with the intervention on the matchday squads as well, it's just building up to this, Xavi not having the authority because he put the club ahead of everything else, and sometimes I think that the manager, especially in Barcelona, needs this sort of leadership and authority and say, right, okay, I am a Barca fan, but you're going to listen to me now. And Xavi, knowing that the club was in a tough financial state, I think that he thought that the best option was not to step up, and I think that it didn't play out in his favour.
Yeah, Dermot, I'm just reading in an article published by The Athletic that, he wasn't also Laporte's first choice, the club president. He wasn't his first choice as manager. The fact that, they lost Ronald Koeman and then they make a U-turn and then go for him. That doesn't bode much confidence in the first place in terms of trying to nurture and build a relationship over time.
Yeah, the whole idea, Xavi has been planning to be Barcelona manager for a decade, going back to when he was a player. It was kind of foretold, Xavi's going to come back and he's going to follow in the footsteps of Pep Guardiola and Luis Enrique, and he's going to be the Barca coach. But his idea for being Barca coach was completely different than how the reality has turned out. He went to Qatar to prepare, which we arguably wasn't the best preparation, but he was there working on the tactics he was going to do. He was talking to people who were going to join his backroom team. He was dealing with Victor Font, who was going to run to be the Barcelona president. And the whole idea was to renew the La Masia model that Xavi is so associated with, to rely on young players, to rely on the philosophy that brought them success in the past. Like, you could argue that maybe that philosophy, needs to be renewed, or needs to, what worked 20 years ago or 15 years ago is not going to work now. But that was what Xavi was planning on doing. Then he comes in, mid-season for Laporta to get them out of a hole, kind of, because Ronald Koeman isn't working out. Instead of relying on youth players, the club decided to take this levers policy to borrow money from the future in order to be able to sign big players like Lewandowski on big salaries, who come in, and we could argue Lewandowski maybe bringing in these big players causes problems in the dressing room as well. There's no kind of continuity or no strict philosophy of what the club is going to do. So Xavi's never really been able to do the job that he wanted to do as Barca coach. He's been trying to find solutions to different problems and kind of improvising as he goes along, which is very much a Laporta type of a policy, is to be improvising and to make short-term solutions now, or short-term decisions now, and kick the problem down the road. Whereas he wanted to come in, put in a long-term plan for the club, build around La Masia. Just hasn't worked out that way at all, and it's a pity. And maybe Xavi's only young. Maybe he'll come back in the future. Maybe there'll be a different Barcelona at some stage down the road, and he might come in and then be able to do the job that he wanted to do as coach. But over the last 2.5 years, it just he's won a La Liga title, which is not so bad, but he's leaving under a cloud. You could see the stresses and the strains it had on him. He's not a spiky character like a Luis Enrique, or even like a Guardiola, who will not the Luis Enrique especially, likes confrontation, likes to take people on. Maybe that's useful to being a Barcelona manager or a Real Madrid manager or a Manchester United manager, to have that strength of personality. Xavi's more into consensus, more into, trying to, get people on side to what he's trying to do. But he's been outmaneuvered politically by Laporta numerous times during his time in charge. And it's kind of an unfortunate way for his time at the club to end. And there's still, 4 or 5 months to go as well, which is going to be,
well, if it lasts that long, as we've said,
for a lot of Barca fans, I think it's kind of a sad situation to be in.
Yeah, Paul, Dermot just alluded to it there, actually, and I do think, there are a lot of positives to him coming back to Barcelona, first La Liga title in how many years, and also in the midst of it, back in the Champions League again, which is, thumbs up in many respects. Obviously hasn't reflected in this season in particular, but from a fan's perspective, how did they feel about Xavi at the club? And also, you sort of get a sense that perhaps it's some of the reactions beyond football of him that sort of really grated at him and his personality as well.
Yeah. I think when he arrived, and even like last summer, Xavi was seen like as the right man for the club. I think that even last season when he won La Liga, there were people at the club who had doubts if Xavi was like an elite manager or an elite tactician, if you want to call it that way. Because as Dermot was saying, Barcelona won La Liga last season without showing like a brilliant display in all games, and that was actually one of the assignments for Xavi this season, just to improve the way they played and being more like offensive oriented and this sort of stuff. But at the same time, he felt like the right man, basically, like a man that was like sensible to what the club needed. He knew how to do the right choice. He was able like to deal with like not the best signings in the world. But yeah, like over the late weeks or months, like all the way that he's been irritated by what you were saying now, like all the constant opinions and all the constant narrative like around the club, you could see that Xavi was like, I'm not going to say losing the plot, because it wasn't the case, but he was like, really overwhelmed, and like sending messages like in press conferences that even like board members were like, we don't really think that's the case. I can remember like the loss against Girona in La Liga this season. That was a really painful one, like inside the club, not just for like losing against like a title contender, but losing against a Catalan counterparts in the way that Girona played. And Xavi said after the game that he think that Barcelona had played better and they just deserved the win. And some board members were like, we lost because against a team that played better football than us. So that
more
was the
like
reasoning.
Barcelona in essence, actually.
Yeah, yes, sort of. Yeah. So this sort of like difference of opinions has been present like over the last year. I would say that this thing about Xavi not being the best manager in the world was present in the club since last season, even when they won La Liga. But yeah, this year it has all imploded in a way that I don't think that Xavi has been able to handle. I don't think, if I'm honest, that it's a problem of like the philosophy of Barcelona, because actually, like if you look, like possibly the most positive note that Barcelona has right now are like the teenagers that are playing with the team. They're playing like amazingly. Lamine Yamal has been the best attacker for Barcelona in the last couple of weeks. Pau Cubarsí, when he's played as a centre back, he's played better than Jules Koundé has done over the last couple of months easily. He played better than Andreas Christensen in the last couple of games as well, although Christensen had been carrying on like a small injury. But this speaks about like a lot about the philosophy of the club and what they have like beyond the first team in La Masia. This is still working. When you put one of those kids in the first team, they are like playing well. Now the worry of the club has to be like to surround them with the right spectrum and with the right like group of players who allows them just to keep growing and just to fight for titles and just to develop like this sort of mentality. What's been wrong, in my opinion, has been like the message from the club, because Laporte just, as Dermot was saying as well, he opted out for, when he won the elections again back in 2021, he opted like to go like in a win now mode, like we're going to be great again, we're going to sell future assets just to bring players in, and we're going to sell like a narrative, not just like with signings, but like to sponsors, to the fans, to the media, that Barcelona is back and that Barcelona will be able to compete for titles as they were used to compete. And the reality is that Barcelona are not like that. Possibly, in my opinion, because with the money that they were able to spend, nowadays you make less of a difference than what you used to do like 25 years ago. Because you have like more competitors and the football market has evolved in a dimension that with this amount of money, you have a lot of clubs that can compete with that. And then because you have to be like really spot on with all the signings when you do a thing like that. And it hasn't been the case. And I go back to the youngsters. If you look at the youngsters now, they basically expose like the summer of livers. Because Lamine Yamal being better than Lewandowski, a guy that for who you paid like 45, 50 million of euros, offering him a 3-year contract plus an extra additional year on a big salary. Is that a good piece of business? Then there's the name of Rafinha, who is competing actually with Lamine Yamal for this right wing spot. Rafinha costed a lot of money as well, and his agent was actually Deco, which tells you a lot about this thing that I was telling you about, like the relationships that Barcelona is sort of like working on, or the way that they believe that they can compete with top clubs to lure big players in, is by having good relationships like with agents and with people involved in the industry. Is that a good option? Is that a good way? Probably not. Now it's more easy to say. Probably not is the best way. But yeah, I don't have like assurances or like any signals that it's going to change in the future, because Deco now is like the sporting director, and Jorge Mendes in the last transfer window was an active part of Barcelona's business. So that's why I think that Barcelona fans are more worried probably on what's coming on than on what's led the club to this situation.
Just thinking when we're hearing all this, Dermot, it doesn't help when you also commit the cardinal sin of starting to read about yourself in the media, or listening to TV pundits like ourselves or radio interviews. In that respect, you feel isolated in the club, and then you also feel like there's no real public support in the same way. That just felt like something that was just chipping away at what we see as now the inevitable.
You could see Xavi getting increasingly irritated with the stuff that was being written about him in the papers and what people were saying about him on the radio and on the TV. And he didn't say it openly, but he knows that doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not that all these pundits are making up their own minds on what they see. Everything is, we all work in the industry and think, there are leaks and there are briefings and there are different power centers within clubs. And Barcelona is, of all the clubs in the world, maybe is at least one of the ones in which that's the most difficult one to deal with for the coach. And Xavi would have known this, from Johan Cruyff, from Pep Guardiola, from Luis Enrique, all these guys. Xavi would have known it. But even still, when you're in that situation and you know that you're being criticized and you feel it's unfair, he's a guy with his own pride as well and his own sense of himself, and he's achieved so much in the game. And he whether he lost, I don't think he's lost confidence in his own ability as a coach or as a football man, but it's just been ticking away at him or digging away at him, all the criticism, because he knows that it's coming from people who maybe they're not saying it to his face, maybe they don't want to say it to his face, and he had to put up with it, and it's been difficult for him to deal with, for sure.
Yeah, well, let's look ahead. He's still got a few months left in the job. Well, we hope anyway. And let's look at what Barca do now. I guess, Paul, from your perspective, and I guess from a fan's perspective at Barcelona, are Barcelona fans ready for change? I mean, this is, it's been this way for so long, right? The wonderful academy, of course, produces some of the best talent in the world, but there needs to be a change of structure. There needs to be a change of style of play, potentially, because the game has also moved on in many respects.
I don't think, if you ask to die-hard Barca fans, I don't think that they are pushing for a change of a style. I think that they would like to see. I mean, if you look at Pep Guardiola, is still being successful. Of course, he has resources. He has the structure of the club, everything that helps him. But the way that he plays, I mean, he sort of proved that with a good structure, you can build a good team playing in a certain way. So that's what Barcelona want to aspire to, and I don't think that die-hard fans want to lose that. What the club has to change is basically the message, be more humble, being more honest. Look, we've tried, but we're not at that level, and we have to be aware that we have a good generation coming up, and we are going to support them, and we're going to try to play better, and that's going to be the way that we're going to take decisions from now on. From a football perspective, we can commit mistakes, but if football-wise, we're in the style that we want to see progress in our team, which has not been the case so far. We are right, and they should believe that all the things would start ticking. But yeah, I mean, I think it has to be something that comes from the board of the club and from the direction of the club. There have to be changes in there, just to show the fans and everyone that Barcelona wanna not to start from scratch, but almost.
Just when you say that about Barca have to change, I agree with what Paul is saying, that, but the core of Barca fans are the former players and coaches and people you talk to. They don't feel that the problem is that Barca's model doesn't work anymore, or what made Barca successful in the past doesn't work anymore. It's as Paul is saying there, it's that Barca are no longer being true to what their essence is, or what the strengths that they have, and what makes Barca special, what makes it unique in world football. A lot of people still believe in that, and it is, it's the youngsters, it's playing a certain way, it's believing in a certain thing. Going back to when they used to have UNICEF on the shirt, even back to that idea of Barca as something, an example for world football. And the current, leadership at the club, the idea that, they use these levers, they have, creative financial solutions to try and pay off, that they deal with big agents, that they sign aging superstars and put them into their team. That's not what Barcelona are supposed to do. Arguably, you can look back at the club's past and say, they signed Thierry Henry and they won the Champions League or whatever back in the day. But that kind of idea of Barca, of what it believes in or what the club represents, they still feel that's the best way for the club to go forward into the future. And they do have amazing young players. Lamine Yamal is still only 16 and he's playing incredibly well. Pau Cubarsí comes into the team for his first couple of weeks in a really difficult situation and shows, what a good player he is. And if you have the right people around them, the right coaches, the right leadership from the top of the club, the patience that is required to go, okay, well, we're going to leave Lamine Yamal out every now and again because he needs to be rested. We're going to bring in Pau Cubarsí, but put somebody beside him. Even Oriol Romeo, who, is a former Barca youth player, we're not going to go so hard on him when he comes back. We're going to accept the limitations that he has. We're going to put the team together in a way that kind of hides that a little bit, as Busquets was exposed as well in previous seasons at different times. But we're going to have that 100% faith in our philosophy, in our way of doing things, and that means that maybe we're not going to be able to win the Champions League, but we're going to be competitive in La Liga, and we're going to be proud of what we're doing ourselves. Because at the minute, what they have is a team where, you know, Barca fans are not proud of a lot of the players who are in the team. They're not proud of the direction in which the club is taken off the pitch as well. And it's not that Barca need to, or they would argue anyway, it's not that Barca need to, you know, accept that what has worked in the club traditionally no longer is possible. It's that the people who are running the club at the moment have to accept that, you know, they need to go back and look at what made them successful in the past and do it that way, not to copy maybe what works at Real Madrid or what works at Manchester United or Paris Saint-Germain or wherever.
I think that the most painful thing is just to have like the president saying publicly that he believes that this team can win the Champions League, and just having like the manager.
Is that a PR thing fundamentally?
No,
just
no.
Keep
It's
the
something
fans
that.
on side, or is it? Do you think Laporte really means this?
I mean, it's a mix of things. I think that deep down he cannot really believe that, but at the same time, it's like the club knows that they have to send this message not just for the fans, but also like for the sponsorship, for like the commercial side of the club, to keep like getting like income in the level of an elite club in the world, because now it's like a significant time to have this on board of the club. But yeah, I mean, they have to take a step back on that direction, because I think that Xavi, this is a mistake that Xavi has done, in my opinion, as well, because he has like followed up on that message. He has taken like this sort of like narrative that the club since Laporta came back wanted to build on, and it wasn't like the right moment for that. It wasn't the right moment because Barcelona doesn't have the structure to go and compete for the Champions League. And what the message should be what Dermot was saying, like we are making a team to try to compete every single game and to go and try to play to Man City and put them into the biggest difficulties that we can. We can promise that we're going to beat Man City because we can't, but we're going to try to make things difficult for them in a certain style. If you do that, I think that Barcelona fans were able to accept and just to digest that, because don't forget that, I mean, Barcelona has been a winning team, but there has been like a winning team like from 40, 50 years ago. And like Barcelona is like a club with more than 100 years of history. Back then, Barcelona was not a winning team. And like, I can remember, like, I am from Barcelona and like my family are like Barca fans, and my granddad was not used to see Barcelona winning. So there's a lot of fans who could accept that and that could process a Barcelona having like 2 or 3 difficult years, but seeing like the local boy playing and like a manager that could put the team in like a certain direction. But it's something that the club basically thought that they couldn't afford to do, because they needed money in and they wanted like just to change the direction of the club by winning now, and it hasn't happened. And now you don't see like a future, like in terms of like what's Barcelona going to be able to do. They don't have any other asset basically to sell. They are like exceeded on their salary cap. Like the new manager that they are going to bring in, his salary is going to be included in this exceeded salary cap because of La Liga's regulations. So that makes it even tougher just to register like a new manager. It's like a lot of things that doesn't allow Barcelona fans to be optimistic for the future.
Paul, you should write the job like write-up of how not to be a Barcelona manager. If you want it, come. If not, just leave this club alone.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the big question though, Dermot, isn't it? Like who takes on this job next? Because you look at some of what Paul said, and that's absolutely spot on. But I guess you've still got these incredible squad of young players, a fledgling academy, a new stadium. It's still a big club in global eyes in many respects. And I guess you also don't have the issue where you're going to be coming after someone like Jurgen Klopp, we've just seen with Liverpool, where you have these massive boots to fill. Surely someone's got to be sort of clasping their hands thinking, I might be able to express my personality on this club.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for Barca next summer. They're not going to have much room in the transfer market because of La Liga. UEFA are also looking at the way that the levers have been used in UEFA's break-even calculations. There's another fine very possibly coming down the line from UEFA. So the new manager is going to have to be somebody who would be willing to take a lower salary than he could earn elsewhere if he's coming from a big club, and to work within the restrictions. You know, a lot of Barca fans would like to see somebody, you know, with a connection to the club. Maybe a Las Palmas coach, Garcia Pimienta, who, you know, spent 28 years, I think, at Barca as a youth player, as a youth coach, got up to be the Barca B coach, as somebody who might be able to guide these young players together. But that would take a big change from Laporta. That would go against everything that Laporta has done since he came in as president. For him to say, okay, we'll get rid of Lewandowski, we'll let Gundogan go, we'll let De Jong go, and we'll just deal around these young players and get a young, low-profile coach to come in. That's maybe not going to sell, Barca to the sponsors. They have a new stadium that, fans should be back at the Camp Nou towards the end of this year. The idea is to fill that, to attract tourists, new sponsors, commercial opportunities, all that. And in order to do that, you want big names. You want a big name manager. You want big name players. It's just really difficult to see where Barca go from here. And if you are a new manager who's thinking about looking at Barca as an opportunity, then you'd have to do your due diligence. I'd say would be the advice.
Yeah, you sometimes think that much like Manchester United, and several other clubs, by the way, you sort of feel that, Barcelona is a club that's held back by the prestige of former glory. And moving away from that is a PR shift. But if I'm honest, it's quite scary. If people come to you just because of what you've done before, and it's proved successful until a point now where actually there's much more scrutiny, it's very hard to move away from those kind of things.
Yeah. And the better is that both clubs that you're mentioning, they haven't been able. I mean, those clubs are like clubs that are being driven by a lot of politics. In the case of United, you have like multiple ownerships, like a fan base which is not like backing a lot like their ownership. And then in Barcelona, you have like a box of executives and like the boardroom, which is filled like with like local businessmen, which of course they want like the best for Barcelona, but they also want the best for their own companies, and they want to build up their profiles and just to be present in the Catalan society. So there's sort of an interest of like looking after that themselves as well, which is again like a bit contradictory. But at the same time, I think that Barcelona has like some positives as well in terms of like trying to recruit a new manager.
Just a quick one, Dermot, and it's sort of counteracting what we're talking about in terms of someone that understands Barcelona in terms of who might come in next. There's a big read on The Athletic and saying that Laporta wants a German coach. I mean, what is this all about? Is it absolute madness? Very different ideologies, really.
Yeah, like that comes from whatever is kind of popular or in fashion at the time. When Laporta was running to be Barcelona president in 2021, Nagelsmann, Tuchel, Klopp, these were the kind of the big names around European football. So people were like, oh, we could get a German coach. Never really taken that seriously. I think then, he came in as president and he stuck with Ronald Koeman, who was there before. Whoever comes in as coach is going to have to accept, especially that they're going to be the first team coach. They're not going to be a manager. They're not going to have a huge amount of say in transfer dealings the way the club is set up at the minute. If they already have a good relationship with Deco or with the agents who have been helping Laporta out in his transfer business recently, and they're willing to go along with that might be useful for them in order to settle into the job. It's not that dissimilar maybe from Real Madrid, where Carlo Ancelotti accepts the restrictions that are on him, knows that he's not going to be running the transfer policy, and gets on with the job. The difference is that Madrid have just a much better squad at the minute than Barcelona have. They have also much more stability going on. Florentino Perez runs the club, and what he says goes, more or less. Laporta runs Barcelona as well, but he's to deal with a lot more factors around it.
Well, the big thing is, what do we think? And we were all speculating, of course, but what do we think Xavi will do next? And I know, Paul, Barca face Osasuna tomorrow. Xavi's been speaking ahead of that match. What did he have to say?
Basically, one of the most surprising quotes, in my opinion, that he said was that he doesn't dismiss the option of like coming back as a Barcelona manager in the future. Basically, he insisted that he's a man of the club. He said like this very same word, that if the club needs him, he will always be there. But right now, he feels that he doesn't need to be there, and that the best thing for the club is for him not to be there next season, and that they need this change and this shake-up. But if in the future there's a situation that it lets like the people in the top of the club believe that Xavi can be the right man, he will be up for it. It's difficult to know which is going to be like the next step for Xavi. I don't think that he's run out of energy of being a manager. I think that he still wants to be a manager, but he's run out. I mean, he just don't want to deal for more time with the Barcelona thing and how everything has panned out here. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he has on his mind if he wants to work on a Premier League move or something like that. Certainly, like if he wants like another job in the top league, I don't think that it's going to be to a club of the level of Barcelona, in my opinion, for how everything has unraveled here in Spain. I think that he will have to take on a new challenge. But yeah, it's going to be like depending on how he feels basically, because right now it looks like he has put like his mental health, as you were saying, and his mental state in front of everything else. So let's see how he feels next summer, basically.
I wonder if there's any parallels here, Dermot, with sort of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when he went to Manchester United. Former club legend. Obviously, Xavi's legendary status is insane compared to Ole's. But I mean, Ole's Champions League final. Let's face it, won United a Champions League. But where do you go after you've managed the biggest clubs in the world? Perhaps neither of them were quite ready for the job, but who takes you next?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for Xavi. Like, it looks like he needs a rest from what we can see from his public and, from what we know about how difficult it's been for him behind the scenes. He needs a rest. And it does give the impression, and even from what Paul's saying there, that he feels he hasn't really had a go at the job, that he hasn't been able to succeed or do the job the way that he wanted to do. And maybe in, a different Barca president in 5-10 years' time, then it would make sense for him to come back and actually do the job that he wanted to do. That may be wishful thinking. In order to do that, you're going to have to keep your career open. He's going to have to be more open, maybe to outside help, outside influence as well. Like, he did surround himself with a lot of kind of coaches who he knew from his earliest days in the club. His own brother was his assistant manager. Excuse me. Maybe it would suit him to go and work even with somebody else, alongside somebody else in a different situation, different environment. Whether it's hard to see him getting a big job in the Premier League, but if he were to go, I don't know, maybe MLS or back to Qatar or something like that, looks like maybe the most likely next step for Xavi, and that he would, learn more along the way to pick up, to add to his own kind of toolkit as a manager. He would definitely have learned from this experience at Barcelona. He would have seen what didn't work as he was Barcelona coach. And you can imagine that he would like nothing more than to return in, whether it is under a different president, and actually make a go and be a big success and get everything across. But at this stage, a lot is going to have to change before he can come back, both for him himself and at Barcelona.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of Real Madrid fans are probably looking at this thinking, more chaos at Barca. Brilliant. More room for us to win La Liga. Gents, thanks so much for your time. Paul, Dermot, as always, don't forget to rate and review the podcast, and we'll be back with another episode tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.